Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for this 1/6 scale radio-controlled Armortek Russian T34 85 medium tank. Since the last video update, a lot of progress has been made to the rear plate over here, as well as some other detail fittings have been mounted to the front. We'll be going over all of these additions and upgrades in this video, so stay tuned because there's going to be a bit of content coming right at you. Starting this video off takes us to a bunch of brand new detail components that I designed for the T34, and finally I have them in from manufacturer. The very first set is the one that you see here on the table, which is the ECA T34 family rear engine hatch set. The set here is intended to replace the stock CNC hatch found on the rear portion of the Armortek T34 85. However, this set is not just suitable for that vehicle, but can be used on any 1/6 scale T34 that you may come across. As for why I went ahead and developed this part, well, quite simply put, here I have in the original parts bag the original T34 85 hatch supplied with the kit. As you can see, the kit supplied hatch is just a single piece of CNC machining. It does have the holes pre-drilled out for use of fasteners, and it does have the hinge integrally CNC'd in, or I should say milled in. I guess that would be a more appropriate term. And that's, well, about it. Rather than utilizing this hatch, though, I decided to go ahead and tool up my own. So here you can see the new replacement hatch that I designed. First, you'll see that the hatch set contains not just the exterior components, but also the components for the interior as well. Here we have a FDM 3D printed component, and this here is meant to be secured on the inside portion of the hull, and once fitted in place, this will give the distinctive bolt pattern that would be integrally milled into the rear plate of the T34 family of vehicles. For fitting in place, you notice that there is a T integrally printed into this section over here, indicating that this is the top, and this is just to prevent you from mounting the piece on incorrectly. As for the hatch itself, here we have the new hatch. So the hatch is a single 3D printing, and it has on it the mounting hinge, but it also has on a handle. The set is offered in two different configurations, where we have versions with the handle and without. As like with many other things, the T34 has an option in this, so you have that option available to you. Both the handle and the hinge have their welds integrally printed on, so no sculpting is required. And on the inside over here, you can see what the inner detailing looks like, and this is more representative of a real component compared to the kit one, which, as we can see here, they have this little inset that we have, and the real T34 hatch, this would not be present. Also, if you notice, the hinge is a mirror image, and this here I was able to get information from a real T34 that I was using for reference and studying to get the detailed parts that we see presently. The hatch is designed to be fully functional. Remember, on this vehicle it's actually important because behind here is the battery kill switch, which is used to power the tank on and off. On the inside portion here, we have a hinge, the other portion of the hinge specifically. You simply snip these sections off here and you can mount this to the tank, and this can be mounted on with fasteners that you see right here. Once the fasteners are in place, you do need to do a little bit of body work, because on the real vehicle, this would just be welded to the vehicle. But we do have inset welds over here, so the fasteners, once mounted in place, are nice and flush, and you could easily polish them over with a little bit of body work. Also supplied is a pin, but you can also replace this with a metal pin of your choice. In addition to the hatch, the set also comes here with a bunch of faux fasteners. These are to give you the detailing of the fasteners themselves, and it's on a nice little convenient runner. You just snip them off, mount them to the appropriate locations. And on the topic of the fastener heads, we have another new set listed to the ECA catalog, which is the T34 rear hatch fastener detail set. This supplies you with all of the fasteners that are found on the rear plate area of the T34 family. One thing that's interesting about the T34 is that the entire rear plate is literally hinged, and you actually undo some fasteners and the entire thing hinges open so you can get access to the transmission. It's an interesting design, but to do that you have a lot of fasteners, and here you can see the fasteners that are supplied with the set. These are just standard nylon prints, and you just snip these off, drill out the appropriate locations, slip that in, and then you have your appropriate detailing. As you can see, there's plenty of fasteners for the job at hand, and once fitted in place, they will really enhance the rear deck of the vehicle. If you're wondering, well, John, why did you just use these instead of just using standard M3 hex bolts? Won't that do the job as well? It can, however, from looking at the real vehicles, the fasteners themselves are a bit thicker compared to what we generally see on an M3 hex. To put things in proportion, let me go ahead and grab one of my fasteners that are loitering around the shop here, and then you could compare and contrast the two. So here is a standard M3 hex head fastener, and here you can see the replacement. It's a little bit larger, more to scale, and it's also a bit thicker compared to the other counterpart. Obviously, these are just for detailing purposes only, are not intended for actual structure. If that was the case, I'll just roll with the metal fasteners. But with the way the kit is designed, the faux ones here will do the job absolutely perfectly, and once painted, will really look the part. As I mentioned before, the entire rear plate is hinged, and that ties us directly into the next detail set, which are the hinges. As I literally just stated, the back end of the T34 is hinged, and the kit does supply you with some basic details for this. However, I went ahead and tooled up the parts that we have here on the table. Also, one thing to mention is that, just like with Sherman's, there are about 4 or 5 different variants of T34 hinges that are found on the vehicles, and I actually have several of them listed on the ECA catalog. When I designed these ones here, I also went ahead and might as well design the other units as well. I'll go ahead and throw up some sample pictures so you can see what these units look like. So whatever T34 you're building, you have the hinge option that's suitable for you. As for which hinges go to which vehicle, that's something that's out of the scope of this video, but that shouldn't be too hard to track down with a little bit of Google search. But back to these ones here. This here is the one set, and this was, I believe, more prominently seen on vehicles, or at least from I've seen in photographs of wartime production. So for this vehicle here, these are the ones I'm rolling with. We have both a male and female end. We also have the pins that are supplied. The pins are hollow. You notice there is a small little hole drilled into them. And on the real unit, there would be a small little retention pin found in these areas here. And this is facilitated with a little bit of wire that is supplied with the sets. The units are functional, even though on this vehicle here, the rear plate is not going to be hinged whatsoever. But in case you are building one of these vehicles and you actually want to make the thing hinge open for one reason or another, these pieces here will be able to fit the bill absolutely perfectly. And it's not just true for this set here, but also with the other ones that I mentioned before. Just like with all the other components, they are pre-welded. So again, no sculpting or any sort of putty work needs to be done by the builder. Just simply snip these guys off, assemble them, and drop them in place. And as long as they're in the correct location, you should be good to go. And that's all I have for the back at this point. This brings us to the front section. And the very first thing I'm going to mention are the parts that we have here on the table. What are they? Well, simply put, these here are the brackets for the front tin work. This ties into what we're going to be going over in this video, being the other sections of the tin work, but from picking up where we last left off in the other video, on the T34 there are some front mud flaps mounted on the front armor plate. And on the real vehicle, in order to secure these in place, there are these mounts that are welded to the front armor plate, and these are the points to which the tin work gets fastened in place. These details here are absent on the stock Armortek kit, so I went ahead and designed them in a 3D printed format, and this is the set that you see here on the table. The very last new detail that's going to be added to this particular build, that's also a new addition to the ECA catalog, is the following set that you see here on the table. As for what it is, well, this is the 1/6 scale 3D printed T34 front idler tension cover cap. Bit of a mouthful, but essentially that's exactly what it does. On the T34, as we know, it is a rear power pack driven vehicle, so the idler wheels are mounted in the front, and in order to adjust the tension, the idler wheel is adjusted with a fastener that is concealed under the front armor plate. And I'm not talking about the Armortek, I'm actually talking about the real one here, and as it turns out, the Armortek kit copies this to actually some pretty realistic effects. On the Armortek kit, there is a brass bushing that's found mounted on the inside portion of the upper hull, and this is where the tension fastener lives, essentially. And on the Armortek kit itself, there is no outward cover cap to give you any sort of detailing. It's just fully exposed, you just paint over it and call it a day. Well, that's not how I roll. On the real T34, there would be a cover cap on this section, or at least there should be, unless it's missing parts, as a lot of them tend to be. So you could actually roll within that format and technically be okay still. But technically, there should be a cover cap in place, and the cover cap is what we have here on this set. The set here is intended to be a drop-in installation onto the Armortek T34, but just like all the other 1/6 scale T34 parts that are on the ECA catalog, are suitable for basically any other 1/6 scale T34 that you may come across, either as another vehicle on the market, or if you just go ahead and scratch build one of these. These sets are made out of the white nylon material, and like I stated before, are just made to be a drop-in install. Obviously, you don't want to use any glue for the installation here, or if you do, you want to use something temporary like white glue or silicone or something along those lines, because if you have to get access to the tension cap, you definitely don't want this thing to be held permanently. As for the detailing, what you see here is essentially what you get. I had some excellent resources on the real cover cap found on the real vehicle, so I was able to implant as much as those details and features onto the small one as possible. On the center portion here, we have this large hex, or I should say a square portion. Obviously, this would be for mounting on a large plumber's wrench or what have you, or a spanner, and be able to rotate and unscrew this thing. That detailing is present. Also, the other small geometric details, like the bottom reinforcing disc over there, as well as also just the way it's rounded, has that conical shape. Everything was shrunk down from the real one I had some good references on. Obviously, the set, or I should say you only need 2 for a T34. As for the third one, I threw it in there as a why not, because this literally adds nothing to cost of production, and it's always good to have spare parts on hand. So in case the need arises and you accidentally lose one, don't worry, I got you covered. Some other new parts to mention are the ones that you see here on the table. However, these here are not going to be utilized on the build that I'm working on. These here I actually took on request by a customer of mine who is working on a Armortek T34, but he wanted to add some extra details to it. The set that we have here is a newly, or I should say a recently addition to the ECA T34 catalog, and this here is the auxiliary fuel tank mounting set. On the T34, we know about the famous ones that are found on the sides. I'm talking specifically about the fuel tanks. On the side of the T34, I went over this in a video or two ago on this project. There are these mounts that are on the side of the vehicle, and this is where we have these distinctive canister type fuel cans that are strapped to the exterior of the vehicle. In fact, I have a set of said canister holders right over here. This is another set. Oddly enough, it's going out in the same order, but here you can see the other set. This is the box frame, and here are the actual straps themselves. Well, in addition to those ones, the T34 also had some auxiliary fuel tanks strapped to the rear plate of the vehicle, as well as also on the sides, but these things are, there's a grab bag of, I don't want to go into that right now. It's not really the place for this video. What I'm actually attempting to say is that there were some other mounts that were designed for the T34. And the fuel canisters that were mounted on the rear portion of the vehicle were smaller in size compared to the ones found on the main lengths of the hull. And with that, the designers came up with a different set of straps for these units, and that's the set that we have here. The components that you see here are, again, a new addition, or recent addition, I should say, to the ECA catalog, and they are posted. What the set gives you is that it gives you the straps for mounting 2 of these fuel canisters to the rear portion of the T34. The ones that you see here on the table do not come with the actual canisters themselves, as these are something that the person who commissioned me, or I should say who contacted me to design these parts, he was going to go ahead and utilize his own tubes for these components. But as for the tubes themselves, they are the same diameter as the ones found on the Armortek fuel tanks parts that are supplied with the kit. I do want to tool up a full set of these because that diameter is not exactly that easily come by. It's kind of like an off size. So, and also I would like to come up with just the canisters themselves for use as a one-stop shop, so you don't have to go ahead and try to track down the canisters or anything along those lines, but that's something that is to come. Back to the set that we have here, the set contains the following components. We have here 2 of the bottom frames and 2 of the mounting straps. So the bottom frames, as you can see, have a very unique shape to them. And this flat section that we have over here that has the peg protruding out of it, this is the part that makes contact with the hull. Also, as a quick side note, I do have this set offered with the integral weld bead details printed on. My customer over here, he likes to opt to sculpting his own weld bead, so that's why these are weld beadless. However, on the catalog, I have an option with the weld beads in place for those that just want to say screw it and just install these and call it a day. Back to the parts here. So the piece is basically like a piece of angle iron that is cut to the shape that we have here. There are these distinctive cutouts found in these sections, and we also have some holes that are drilled in. For reference, I had some fantastic references of these components from a surviving vehicle with these units in place, and I was able to use those to design the sets that we have here. The sets contain, or I should say, the bottom section is just this round piece of stock, as I mentioned before, and the way the canister is actually held in place is with this strap. The strap is unique because it consists of two straps that are more or less permanently spot welded together, and then they are hinged on the bottom area. The strap comes at the shape that we have here, so no flexing or modding is required. It's ready to go. You just slip the tube in, much along the lines of the other ones, kind of where I got the idea from. And you just slip the tube in, and then it just anchors everything in place. This section over here where we have a hinge, this here would actually go into this area that we have right over here like that, and the unit is pinned in place. The pins are included with the sets. The other section, you'll see here where we have this bridge section, you'll see that there's a hook, and this hook here connects to this little eyelet ring that is present. This would be secured to the vehicle. So basically the way this works is you would hook this guy in place once it's secured to the vehicle, and then you would hinge it together, and that would keep everything strapped together and would prevent the tube from moving around. This design here would be later utilized by the Russians on vehicles that came afterwards, such as the several versions of the T34-85 that continue to see service in the post-war years, but we also see this on the T54, some versions of the T55, as well as the ISU 152 or 122 54, which is another very interesting vehicle. I did a video on 135 a little while ago. They all utilize basically this system here to mount on a smaller fuel canister that's found on the rear section. There's another thing I do want to mention is that the Russians have another pattern of external fuel cans mounts like this one here, but that one, from what I was able to tell, was a post-war variant, and that was something that you would see on these Russian T34s and other vehicles in the 1950s time frame. I do want to go ahead and tool that up at some point. However, right now, with scheduling being what it is, I don't have it on the docket, but as I often mention, I do take on commission design work like this, so if anyone is interested in having that set designed up and printed out, you can reach me via the contact email listed below, which is info@eastcoastarmory.com, and I could go ahead and design up a set just for you. And, well, not just for you, it'll be posted on the catalog. And as I mentioned, that's how a lot of new items get posted to the catalog. Case in point, you're looking at some right here. And here we have the tank with all of the fittings, or I should say the ones specifically for this build, now fitted in place. Let me go ahead and bring the camera in closer so you get a better idea on what exactly was fitted. So the first and most prominent detail to mention is the rear access hatch. This was dropped into place over the kit one, and the installation went by really, really easily and effortlessly. Basically, you just pin the hinge together, drop the unit in place. Once you make sure everything is squared away, you mark the two areas with a pencil, drill them out, and then 2 M3 fasteners are used for the installation. The fasteners that I used were Phillips drive pan, or I should say cheesehead screws. They're really, really commonly found in home improvement stores, and this was the one that I used for this build. The reason why I went with the cheesehead as opposed to a cap screw is that the cap screw has more material that sticks on the top portion, and with the shallowness of the hinge over here, that would just result in you, the builder, having to do more grinding. With the Phillips drive, the top portion is much narrower, or I should say flatter in comparison, and so I'm able to have a flusher appearance. And on top of that, because it is being driven in with a Phillips as opposed to something like a hex bolt over here, the tool has good grip onto the part, and you can get a nice, tight, and strong installation. Of course, there is a nut on the reverse side. Once the units are fitted in place, from this point here, I'm going to go ahead and put a little drop of sculptable epoxy on that area, polish it down, and once the bodywork is concluded, the hinge will be all set and ready to go. The unit is fully functional. The fasteners have been added to the appropriate locations, and if I open it up, you can see the other portion of the kit, which is the detail face for the inside. As I mentioned before, the unit is just glued in place from the inside, and once fitted, it gives you the illusion that these little fastener locations are integrally cut into the metal. Now, in this one here, the tolerances are slightly loose, and this is something that needs to be corrected on the production units. However, the design is still one that works very well. The piece, once painted, is going to look really, really great, and if you're building a 1/6 scale T34 with the full interior, this over here will definitely come in handy. On the hatch itself, I don't have any of the fasteners present, as on the real unit you would have to unbolt every single one of these to get access to the interior, but for the case of being expedient, I went ahead and just left these ones here. I trimmed them shorter than they need to be, and then these are just for detail purposes, except for the one in the center here, which actually grabs onto the one hole here in the center, and it just helps keep it in a little bit more of a sturdier manner. However, as you can see, if you need to just walk up to the tank and kill the battery or turn the battery on, open this guy up, and you can just flick the switch right over there, close them up, and you're ready to roll. And the appearance is absolutely seamless. On the topic of the fasteners, all of the faux fasteners have been added in place. To do this, I took some careful measurements with my Tamiya model over here, but just to double check, I went ahead and looked at several real examples of T34s online to make sure everything was where it needed to be, and more or less I think I was able to pull it off. Of course, you want to carefully mark everything with a pencil, and then once the pencil marks are all in the appropriate locations, I used a 1/8 of an inch drill bit to drill out all the locations, and then the pieces were snipped off and just glued in place, revealing the final results that you have here. Also, you can see the hinges that I also touched upon before. With the camera readjusted, hopefully you get to see the hinge in better light. The hinge itself is a very easy installation. Basically, you just assemble the unit, then when it comes time for installation, you just bend the hinge so that it matches the angles found on the rear plate and the bottom plate over here, and the adhesives do the rest. You do have two options for installation. You could do it the quick way like I did here, where you just amputate the stems and then glue the unit to the rear portion of the vehicle. However, if you want something that's going to be a bit more robust, say again, you're going to make this thing actually pivot and hinge open, and you want that extra strength, that can be done too. You just have to keep the stem. The stem is a nice diameter to it, so there's a lot of strength and meat to it, and all you gotta do is find the location, drill out the two areas, and then drop the hinge in place, and now you'll have much more strength and rigidity compared to the way we have it here in the static format. For the usage of this model, however, the method over here is more than suffice. Also, one other thing I want to mention is with the pin. Here we have the hinge pin that I mentioned before, but now you can see it with the retention, or I should say the lock pins in place. And in true Soviet or Eastern Bloc fashion, their pin is literally just a pin. There's no cotter pin or anything fancy along those lines. It's literally just a pin hammered in place, and that's more than suffice at keeping this thing where it needs to be. The pin itself is made from a piece of thin wire, like right over here, and this, by the way, is supplied with the hinge set, so you have everything you need for the installation from the get-go. The very next thing I want to mention are the rear fender mounts, and this is something where I deviated from the kit. The kit just has the rear tin work, and it's just stamped sheet metal that you bolt in place with the two fasteners found on, hang on, let me just adjust the camera, right over here, and then there are two other fasteners found on the sides. However, on the real T34, as I shown before on the front, the rear tin work is actually fastened in place onto a bracket that's welded to the rear portion of the vehicle. So on the model over here, I wanted to add that missing bit of detailing, and the way I did it is with some brass angle. Here you can see the angle in better light, and it's literally just nothing more than a piece of K&S brass angle stock. I believe this is the 1/4 inch one. I cut it to shape and then marked out the locations. For the rear tin work, there are 3 fasteners found on this side, and then there are 2 other fasteners found on the other 2 portions over here just to hold it at bay. Now, on the model over here, I used angle because I needed to get some really good strength on this section. On the real vehicle, this would just be welded in place, and that's more than suffice for the task at hand. However, because of the sprocket over here, and this is a radio control tank, so crap being flung up is definitely something that you have to consider. I went with the angle because with the angle, I could go ahead, drill holes into the armor plate, tap them, and then secure them in place with fasteners, and that's exactly what I did. So here you can see the fasteners, they have been added in place, and then with the Dremel I went ahead and ground them down to be as flat as possible. The next step is going to be where the illusion comes in, where I add the weld beads in these areas over here, and then once everything is set and dry, this thing is going to have the appearance that it was actually welded to the side over here, but you have the strength of the fasteners grabbing into the armor plate that I mentioned before. In a way, it's the best way to have your cake and eat it too. This was done, by the way, to the unit on the opposite side. I was thinking on making this a 3D printed component. However, unlike the ones in the front, these ones here are a bit more important because of the sprockets being mounted on the rear. So because of that, I wanted to err on extra strength, so I went ahead and went with the design that you see presently. And on the front of the vehicle, you get to see the other bits that I referenced before. Starting with the 2 simplest ones, which are the idler cover caps. Here you can see the caps fitted in place, and as I mentioned before, these are a drop-in installation for the Armortek piece. With the way I had to make some modifications to the piece, the hole slightly elongated, so the stock piece doesn't fit on as snug. However, if you are just rolling with the stock unit, it should be more on the snugger side. For this one here, because of the slightly enlarged holes, I'm going to go ahead and add a little drop of silicone to these components when it comes time for final installation. However, you can see that the pieces definitely look far better compared to the kit original, which has absolutely nothing present. It's just a simple way just to add all that much more extra pizzazz to your build. And that brings us to the front tin work mounts. The units themselves drop into place. With the way the kit is designed, there are 4 fastener location holes in this section over here to bolt the metal tin work where it needs to go. And what I went ahead and did was, during the design of this piece, I actually designed this so that the holes line up, more or less, with the stems found on the stock component. With this in mind, you may have to just drill the holes out slightly in order to get this piece to just drop directly into place. But once it's held in place with some adhesives, you're good to go. As you can see, it does give some very nice detailing to the front, as it has this really cool geometry over here with the welds, and once everything is painted, it's going to really shine. The only thing to do now is to fabricate the tin work, which is going to go on this section over here, and once the tin work is fitted in place, you will see the geometry like the way you have right over there on the bottom portion. However, before I go ahead and do that, you might as well get one last glimpse of the bow section with the brackets in place, just before they go ahead and progress past this point here. Hopping forward a day takes us to the rear hatch area once again, and here you can see what it looks like with the bodywork now added in place. As you can see, or as you cannot see, the fasteners that were mentioned before have been completely covered up and are now blended away smooth. This was done with a 2-part epoxy in order to fill the majority of the cavity, and then a final top coat of red putty was smeared on in order to give it the nice seamless look that you see here. Normally I would go ahead and wait for this to set further and then polish it down slightly with some sandpaper, and I may do that to this one over here, but remember, on a T34, crudeness is actually a virtue, so probably going to leave it a little bit on the rougher side again to give it that more authentic look. And on the topic of concealing things with bodywork takes us to the fender mounts. You can see the welds have been sculpted in their place, and with the welds now sculpted, this gives you the added detailing, but it also does a fantastic job with concealing the mounting fasteners that I mentioned before. Once the tin work is completed and fitted in place, it's going to look absolutely seamless. Needless to say, it's also a mirror image on the opposite side. At the time I'm filming this scene right now, I'm actually in the process of working on the tin work, folding sheet metal, getting it to the appropriate geometry, and then once it's primed, it's going to be fitted to the tank. However, that's going to be the topic of the next video update, which will actually be posted sooner than later because I actually have quite a bit of stuff that's ready for installation on this model at this time. But again, you just have to wait a week or so until that video makes its debut. Also on the topic of weld beads, you can see that I added the weld beads to the front glacis plate over here, and this was done to both sides. As we can recall from one of the previous videos, I actually had to add an extender to the plate over here, as on the real T34 85, the front glacis plate overextends slightly from the side armor. That was achieved by the addition of the extra material, and now the front section is really completed with the addition of the sculpted weld beads. There are some more weld beads that remain to be sculpted. Right now you can see I've also started adding them to the turret roof over here. I just had some extra epoxy left over, so I utilized it all on this area. Probably after filming this, next time I have another batch of epoxy mix, I could continue the welding around this section over here. But as you can see, it's really beginning to look as more of a final end product. Of course, the cupola is the last thing remaining for the turret, and that is still in development. As soon as I have that in hand, you'll definitely be one of the first to know. As you can see, the rear area here is fleshing out very, very well. There are only a handful of parts remaining, like the exhaust manifolds, the rear hook points in the back, as well as the blower guard found on the top deck, and that's really all there is to the rear detailing. Really, this build is accelerating to the end zone. It may not seem like it, but it is. The only thing that's been slowing me down a little bit is designing and tooling up the remainder of the last of the detail components. And once those are designed and manufactured, once I get those parts in hand, this thing could basically slide off into paint the exact same week. So it's actually that close to the end zone here. And I don't know about you, but I can most certainly taste it. And of course, I will gladly be taking you all along through that journey until this thing finally gets the done stamp placed on it, which will be a very relieving feeling for me. But, of course, those are all going to be topics for further videos down the road. And with that, that is the perfect place to wrap up this project update video for the 1/6 scale Armortek Russian radio-controlled T34-85. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being 1/6 scale project update videos like this one here, or the other smaller scale model showcase videos that frequently get posted to this channel. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There, I have more photographs of this particular build that have been posted all the way since the project start, as well as photographs of the other larger and smaller scale builds that have been seen on the channel previously. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again, I'll be seeing you all again on the next one, and hopefully fairly soon. Take care.